I will not be lectured on gun control by a government that left 300,000 guns in Afghanistan for the Taliban. And that's not even to mention the guns that we left to the cartel, to a bunch of authoritarian regimes around the world, and a bunch of different criminal organizations around the world.
And this is our same government who wants to take away our guns, and yet they support guns in Ukraine for the Ukrainian citizens to defend themselves for freedom.
So welcome back to the Freedom Family. We are Freedom Families United, not just a YouTube channel, but an organization. Check us out at freedomfamiliesunited.com. We have some videos, the first videos we put out on our YouTube channel here that explain a little more about our organization. But today we want to talk about the Uvalde shooting, other shootings and uses, protective acts by citizens and women using guns to protect themselves, families, and large groups of individuals. And we also would like to talk about Freedom Families United and our official stance on the Second Amendment, which we are very strong proponents of the Second Amendment rights and very strong defenders of Second Amendment rights. And about the Uvalde shooting, there is this report.
Yeah, so the Texas House of Representatives Investigative Committee, it's an interim report, so it is not complete. There are a lot of questions still unanswered about the Uvalde shooting. But what this report really brought out was a massive failure in leadership, especially on the police side. So there were some school failures to start with. For security, it was lackadaisical. The police had been warned about the door that actually got breached was not locking.
We'll get into all of that. But this essentially, we're saying that the information we're giving out, this is, weeks after the Uvalde shooting, and we still are having the story constantly changing, and the amount of lies and people trying to cover their own butts, and it's
still unknown.
Yes,
still
there's
chaos.
so much unknown, so even things that we report today might be untrue tomorrow, and so just know that moving forward here. But the Uvalde shooting, the law enforcement failed at every level in this instance. They went in to here, and they had over 300 officers before they actually did anything. It was an hour and 14 minutes before they actually went in and took this shooter out, when they were actually on scene within 3 minutes, I believe, of the shooting beginning. And this is... so 376 law enforcement in total were on scene throughout this entire thing, and 300 on scene initially. And some of the initial reports, just to show you how this can get so convoluted and so much BS thrown into these things, we were initially told that this was stopped by a off-duty Border Patrol officer who was a husband and a father, was off-duty, and went in with a shotgun that he borrowed from his barber. And that would have been illegal, obviously, because here he borrowed a weapon from his barber, ran in there. There's no reason for him to be able to go into this school with a gun, and I think he did go into there with a gun.
He didn't go inside the building, but he helped evacuate kids outside the building.
So he's on school campus with a gun, and there's a mass shooting event, so I don't know what type of laws there are surrounding that if all of a sudden you're able to bring a gun into a building because there's a mass shooter. But obviously parents wouldn't care. If you were armed and you were on scene first, you would probably go in as a parent.
The biggest failure, I think, was the breakdown in the lack of communication. The chief of police was on scene, and sorry, you had something first?
Yeah, but before we get into all these failures,
okay.
This is talking about people that stopping mass shootings. This is a mass shooting that was just stopped by a armed 22-year-old. He was told he saved countless lives in this mall, and he took out this shooter with his 9mm pistol, and this was actually a gun-free zone. This is something that I think that they should have actually arrested this gentleman for. He's in a gun-free zone. They should have actually enforced the law and arrested him, because to show how stupid these gun-free zones are. Here's this gentleman that's there, a good guy with a gun, able to stop a bad guy with a gun, and you want all of these citizens inside this mall to be unarmed? Turn over their right to protect themselves to, mall security? When these police officers that had just done training the week before, just done training on mass shootings in schools, and they failed at every single level, and I'm supposed to turn my security over to a mall cop when I go into a mall. So he illegally carried into this location and saved countless lives because of it. But getting back to the failures, go ahead.
Okay, so it was just a total breakdown of communication. So they had several different agencies, almost a dozen agencies, I think, on scene here. And you had two different teams on two different sides of the building, one on the north side and one on the south side. And the chief of police is on one of the sides. And Neither side was
Almost
communicating with each other.
immediately, the chief of police is on scene.
But nobody established a command post. Nobody established a center for communication outside the building. And so the teams on either side of the building weren't communicating the entire time. One thought it was a suspect barricade situation, where in that case, you prioritize police lives because you think that the classrooms are empty. And then the other side thought that there was an active shooter. They had the 911 calls from a teacher and students inside of the classroom. So they knew that there were possible victims injured, dead, and waiting inside of those classrooms.
To give you the scope of what you're looking at here, this hallway, the two classrooms are right here, one, and then there's another one. They're connected to each other. And one of them, the door, I don't know which one, but one of these two, room 111, the door does not work, the lock. So you can, and they didn't know this going in. Apparently nobody tried the door because they could have immediately gone in. They thought they needed a master key. There was no communication between these two teams, as Michael said, this whole entire time. There was no communication to the principal this entire time to ask for a master key, to ask what the status of these rooms were. Some of the people on the scene thought that these rooms were empty because the lights were out. Some of the people, obviously after this officer here, there was outrage that he was checking his phone. This was him getting text messages from his wife telling him that he'd been shot. And so this image,
she had been shot.
She had been shot. And so this image became all the more disgusting because here he would actually have gone in trying to save her, and they're saying, no, you've got to get off scene. You're, conflicted now. They should have let him go in. Go save your wife. What the hell's wrong with these people? And then that wasn't the only gentleman. This guy here was checking his phone earlier as well, and he's seen going and get some hand sanitizer. This is 57 minutes into the whole ordeal. They're just kind of like bored with the situation. And you can see the body cam footage. You can hear shots going off in the first minutes they're on scene with the early body cam footage. And even one gentleman tries to rush in and then gets shot at and backs out. And if you haven't been shot at, if you haven't been in combat, I was in the Army infantry 5.5 years and deployed and been shot at, more times than I should have. And it is a very scary experience. That's why you need courage. That's why soldiers need courage, because courage cannot be present without fear. And there's extreme fear when you're getting shot at and you realize I could die at any minute. You see bullets hitting the ground, hitting the walls beside you. One of your buddies gets shot. There's extreme fear associated with that. And you have to have courage to force your body to do something that is not natural and go into that room, to force yourself into harm's way, to tell yourself that it is too important that I go in and save these children. And you have to keep pushing forward. And Uvalde just underscores why we should be arming our citizens, our teachers. And these teachers were expected to wait on law enforcement to show up, and then law enforcement gets on scene to help protect and save them, and takes an hour and 14 minutes to go in, and you're expected to turn over your right to protect yourself to them.
So we're going to talk here in a second about some women who were able to defend themselves because they had a weapon. I imagine, what would it have been like if this teacher who died, right, if she would have had a weapon in her desk or on her person, that she was able to get to and at least put up a fight, at least, have the option of defending herself and her students.
Well, I'll tell you, if the psychopath knew that this was an armed school, he would have never gone there in the first place. It was a soft target. Schools are the gun-free zones. They just attract mass shooters, because if you're going to go do a mass shooting, you want to encounter no resistance at all. No chance of you being stopped until you've fulfilled your desired goal. So that's why 96% of mass shootings happen in gun-free zones, happen in malls, happen in schools. And we can empower these teachers, like that woman. Here's this woman, pregnant woman, saves her husband and kills one of two home intruders with an AR-15. And so these two gentlemen entered these two killers entered her house, got to her husband before he could get armed, and started beating him, and likely going to beat him to death or kill him. And then she pokes her head out of the room. She's pregnant, and she, I believe, has a child in the house too. And they start shooting at her. She comes back out with an AR-15, takes out one of them, and the other one gets away. Also, this happened one day after the Uvalde shooting. In West Virginia, an armed female bystander kills a man firing at a party. And so this guy drives by, seems annoyed at this party happening, I believe is at an apartment complex, and comes back and starts shooting, and she takes him out before he can cause any damage there.
What's funny to me, too, is so the left is all about women's rights, right? And especially right now with the Roe v. Wade, all about women's rights. and rape culture and how women are such victims in our society. But what's crazy to me is that they don't defend the Second Amendment for women, especially. It is the great equalizer. We should be able to protect ourselves against evil that exists, because evil exists, clearly.
These could have been the two strongest men in the world coming to beat her husband and kill her entire family, and that AR-15 would have killed them. It does not matter how strong or skilled those men were. The fact that she had that weapon made it an equal fight. It was the great equalizer. You want equal rights for women? Gun rights. Equal right to protection. This woman saved a bunch of children. If it was up to her, and this gentleman was on a rampage with a knife or a sword like they do over in the UK, where they may have a hard time getting access to these things, she would have no chance of stopping him. Absolutely no chance. In fact, most of the people at that party might have had a hard time if this gentleman was, larger and stronger and more skilled with a weapon than they were. You pull out a gun, and that bullet shoots with the same amount of power regardless of who's pulling that trigger. And Forbes underscores this point in this article. That time the CDC asked about defensive gun uses, and this is the takeaway here. Defensive gun uses by victims are at least as common as offensive uses by criminals, with estimates of annual usage ranging from about 500,000 to more than 3 million in the context of about 300,000 violent crimes involving firearms. And that means you're at least doubling the rate of protective uses of firearms compared to violent uses of firearms in the United States every single year. And in Texas, this article says Texas school mandates clear backpacks after the Uvalde massacre.
Because they're just desperate for something, right? The parents probably in that district are like, do something, protect our kids, make sure they're safe. So they're like, oh, what do we do? Oh, clear backpacks.
So you want to laugh and scoff at this, but this is their solution. This is what they can do. They feel so powerless that they are saying, well, it went to stop that shooting, but maybe it'll make some of us feel better. Obviously, this kid waltzed into Uvalde, waltzed in from the outside, didn't even go to the school, and started this massacre. And here, they're just saying, well, we don't have anything else that we can do, so let's mandate clear backpacks, and maybe that'll make us feel a little better. Like, this is how desperate things have gotten. And so we are not, let's talk about values for 1 second here. I want to connect this back in. So Freedom Families United talks about values, and we got some other good information after this coming up. But let's get to values first. We have 12 values that we teach and embed, distill deeply within our children. And 4 of those values connect well with these stories. And those 4 values are freedom, courage, family, and service. Obviously, freedom, when we're talking about the Second Amendment rights. Second Amendment rights were established to, first and foremost, the right to self-protection. Not for hunting, not for sport, not because they're cool and they make a loud noise. They were established for the right to protect ourselves against all enemies, foreign and domestic, especially against our own government. That's why we formed them, and we are supposed to have the same rights to bear arms that our government has, and those rights are being infringed upon. It is the only amendment that says shall not be infringed. The only one of all the amendments that says the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, and it's absolutely being infringed upon. The things they've done to limit our Second Amendment rights without actually amending the Constitution are wrong, because they should have to go in, and I think they should go in and amend the Constitution to not allow citizens to even own, larger explosive devices, even like nuclear devices, which are clearly covered under the Second Amendment. But we could easily limit those things. But saying that the Second Amendment doesn't allow us to have machine guns, automatic machine guns, that's not true. If the citizens want that, they need to go in and amend the Constitution. And so we are strong proponents of the Second Amendment.
I heard
and
a
we
quote.
Support the Second Amendment.
I heard a quote that said, "A person with a gun is a citizen. A person without a gun is a subject."
That could be seen nowhere better than places like China. And then family and service. The reason these are brought into it is because you are the first responder. Police are not a first responder. You are there to protect your family, the ones that you love. And when you're out in public, you are a protector. You are the first responder. And I can think of no greater service or no greater love to give to your family and those that you love than to serve them by putting your life on the line by protecting them. And it's a little easier to protect them when you actually have a concealed carry, when you're actually prepared to protect them rather than just trying to be a bullet sponge and jump in front of them and stop a mass shooter with, by throwing things at them or whatever when you find yourself in one of these gun-free zones.
And we do want to say that we appreciate first responders. I feel like their service, with what they contribute to our community and to our country, is very selfless and wonderful. And I feel like in Uvalde, those individuals, their courage would have been bolstered if they would have had proper leadership. Their courage would have come forth, and they would have done what they needed to do quicker and more efficiently, because sometimes they do give the ultimate sacrifice of their life. And that is a great service to our community, and we do appreciate that.
That's a critical point, because 300 people on scene, 300 law enforcement on scene before they went in, that's not 300 cowards. That's insane if you actually believe that. In fact, the fog of war is a very real thing. I've been to combat, and the fog of war and the confusion is a very real thing. Most of those people are probably wondering what's going on. Did they take him out yet? Especially people outside saying, oh, I heard gunshots. That must be them going in, taking him out. Okay, I'm supposed to hold the perimeter. I'm supposed to stop these parents from going in and causing a scene or getting shot themselves. Okay, I'm doing my job. And then the courage of some of these men failed, especially at the leadership level. They should have been in there immediately. But some of the people in that hallway were likely confused, saying, oh, they said the rooms were empty. They said it was locked. Nobody can get in. They tried to breach, I think. I don't know. So you forget that if they knew the full story, most of these men standing there would have rushed in and told their leadership to F off. So the fog of war, I imagine, is what we will find out that kept these patriots, these heroes, from actually going in and doing their jobs. And then we got some of these cowards that need to be immediately fired and kicked out of the police force, and I think they should be tried for crimes. It's disgusting the way they acted and how they allowed those children to be shot one after another. And some of those people in that hallway knew every time a shot went off, that could be a teacher, that could be a child, that could be another child, and they just stayed there. And fear kept them paralyzed, or incompetence, or whatever. But the fact is, I believe they should have to answer for their crimes.
Well, and I'm sure so do the families of those sweet kiddos and teachers.
Yeah, those families. Imagine how bad you would feel if you were one of those cops that were stopping those parents from going in and just doing your job, and then you find out how incompetent and immoral and how cowardice that your leadership was being, and how you could have actually allowed those parents in, and I guarantee you allowed those parents past the line, they would have gone and stopped that shooter. One way or another, they would have got it stopped. And they weren't even armed. And here these cops were actually waiting for backup before they would do anything, waiting for all this equipment, all this stuff. But what we can actually do, actions that we can take, because we're about actions. We don't just whine about something. We actually want to take actions. And the actions we can take is actually spread the word about these shootings and our right to protect ourselves, and take over the narrative. Don't be afraid. The failure of the police in the Uvalde shooting just underscores our need for the right to protect ourselves. We cannot rely on law enforcement. And it's even underscored more here in New Mexico, because we have two people that we know personally in the last couple weeks have called for help at 911, and they were on hold, both of them, for over 15 minutes before they got help.
Yeah, they couldn't even get through to dispatch.
Luckily, it wasn't a mass shooting on a school, just somebody passed out, somebody else that fell off a roof. But yeah, over 15 minutes for them to get help. So here in Albuquerque area of New Mexico, we have a complete failure of even the 911 first responders. And so you can expect at least a 20 to 30 minute wait time if you're going to need help, if you need a first responder. And I bring up this of the Second Amendment lobbies, this chart of the total number of clients in the Second Amendment lobbies, because I want to underscore that we need to be supporting these groups. Our dollars speak louder than our words. We need to actually put our money where our mouth is. I have so many conservatives that give money to places like Disney, Netflix, Amazon, all these places who directly oppose your values and fund organizations that are in direct opposition to your goals and your values and your values with your children, the things that you want to teach your children. And they continually throw money at these organizations, but they're unwilling to actually donate to the organizations that fight for our rights. And out of these, you have the National Rifle Association. We don't give to the NRA. I do not have a...
We used to.
We used to, but the NRA has shown themselves to be, have quite a bit of corruption in the NRA, and they constantly sit down and negotiate away your and my Second Amendment rights. They are a lobby that we pay to protect our Second Amendment rights, and they say, oh, don't take all of them. How about I just give you some of their rights? How about just some of them? And they're constantly negotiating our rights. But we give to the gun owners of America. even after we were fired by Sandia National Laboratories, we still give to the gun owners of America because our Second Amendment rights are just that important. And I recommend, if you don't know what Second Amendment lobby group to give to, what group that fights for our rights and goes forward with legislation, Gun Owners of America is great. If you do give to the National Rifle Association, that's fine as well. They do good work, and I'm hopeful for them in their future. If we completely abandon them, I'm sure the left will be happy to take over the organization and turn it against us, which I wouldn't be surprised to happen in the future with how many members they've been hemorrhaging over the years. So we need to donate to groups like this, and Freedom Families United is fighting for things on the ground. Each and every week we're meeting and talking about the important issues and actually taking action. And actions that we've taken recently, personally that we've taken, we've been out in the last week or two here knocking doors, having discussions with people on the ground about the upcoming election, important issues, even arguments with people that come answer the door that vehemently oppose us, and that's always fun.
Yeah, meeting with leadership, holding them accountable, helping them be courageous and doing their jobs better and more transparently.
Yep. The legislators, and Michael was on the phone with the members of the PEC, the Public Education Commission, and working with them and building this anti-critical race theory coalition here in New Mexico, and even filing Freedom of Information records requests. So we are taking actions. We are not just talking about these things, we're actually doing something. And so we're about living our values and taking action. And I want to close on this thought that you are your own first responder. And I want everybody out there to remember that when seconds count, the police are just an hour, 14 minutes, and 8 seconds away.